Good morning to New York. The VTC meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Mr. Nikolai Mladenov, Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process and Personal Representative of the Secretary General, Mr. Daniel Levy, President of the US Middle East Project, and Dr. Khalil Shikaki, Professor of Political Science and Director of the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. And I now give the floor to Daniel Levy.
I would like to thank the Council and the German presidency for giving me this opportunity to brief you today. As of today, there has been no further Israeli annexation on the West Bank. That does not translate into a moment for self-congratulation. Keep the champagne on ice. Refraining from de jure annexation must, of course, carry no reward. Avoidance of criminality is normative, not prizeworthy. De jure annexation would exacerbate and accelerate existing negative trends. But whether it happens or not, it is a symptom of a deeper crisis: the permanent denial of freedoms, rights, and equality to Palestinians. The annexation focus also ignores and neglects the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza living under permanent conditions of inhumane closure. The collective challenge is not just how to prevent annexation, but how to address occupation and these deeper and entrenched structural problems. The peace process, as currently framed and pursued, offers a place of refuge from hard choices, a comfort zone where the law of diminishing returns has a lockhold. It has brought us to the brink of annexation and the precipice of PA financial collapse. It is not a question of trying harder, of resuming negotiations. More of the same guarantees further deterioration. It is a failure of learning, politics, and imagination. So we mustn't look to quick fixes, but to creating the conditions, the building blocks for future progress that can deliver equality, dignity, and security for Palestinians and Israelis alike. And this is not a conflict of two equal parties pursuing equally destructive unilateral actions. Focusing primarily on the Israeli side reflects relationships of power of an occupying party whose actions preeminently determine outcomes on the ground. So I would humbly propose the following items for the consideration of this body. 1, accountability. If the unlawful and peace-negating policies of Israel continue to be met with impunity, then there should be no expectation of positive change. It's that simple. Israel pursues policies in violation of international law and of UN resolutions because it can. No tangible cost or consequences attached. Rhetorical condemnation, unmatched by real accountability and sanction, invites derision. While it should be costly, the occupation has for Israel become cost-free. 2, rights. Human rights and international legality should be our guiding star, rather than being subordinated to maintaining a peace process that is so palpably failing. That means, for instance, backing Palestinian and Israeli human rights defenders, backing serious investigations when grave human rights violations occur, including at the ICC, and prioritizing a permanent ceasefire to protect civilians, in particular in Gaza and southern Israel. To place issues of human rights and international law front and center is not to hark back to stale and boring items. It is to insist on the timeless and the necessary. That includes the right to be free of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. 3, 2 states. the two-state outcome is not infinitely elastic. There is no state minus. That is called continued occupation. A plan that empties the yet-to-be-established state of Palestine of all attributes of sovereign statehood cannot offer a path to peace. Preemptively normalizing regional relations with Israel while occupation continues is to indulge maximalism. 4. Beyond partition. Given the gap between what is necessary for a genuine two-state outcome that could emerge by mutual consent and what is the reality on the ground as dictated by Israel, it might be necessary for members of this body to consider, alongside expressing a preference for two states, an acknowledgement and a readiness to engage with other ideas, so long as any alternatives respect one irrevocable standard, namely the full enfranchisement, equal and democratic rights for all those within the political and physical space in question. In 1947, it was the UN which determined in favor of partition. There were majority and minority positions, and I would simply draw your attention to the prospect that the partition question might need to be revisited in the not too distant future. And finally, 5, values. We should also look to nurture shared values of equality and humanity in navigating a way forward. For instance, to understand and mutually engage with the experience and dispossession of Palestinian refugees and with the Jewish impulse for a shelter of last resort. At this time where historic issues of racial justice have belatedly come to the fore, and as we mourn American civil rights leader John Lewis, it is important to remember the many Palestinian and Israeli voices who have and continue to stand up for justice and equality. As a recent example, I would urge you to look at an essay by American Jewish intellectual Peter Beinart, A Jewish Case for Equality in Israel-Palestine, and to consider the mobilizing and liberating power now today of a narrative of equality over separation, of dignity over real estate, whatever the eventual political dispensation. And if and as some of these options are examined, Israelis should be more, not less, engaged with. There should be wide-ranging discussions with different sectors of Israeli society, including those supportive of the existing trajectory and those dissenting from it. Similarly, to engage varied Palestinian constituencies, both inside and outside of the occupied territories, as well as with Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel. And finally, as is evident from this briefing, the Palestine-Israel situation is going through a quite profound transition, as indeed is our global geopolitical system. The call of Secretary General Guterres to avert a great fracture and maintain a universal system should be strongly supported, alongside the SG's recognition that the COVID pandemic has underscored the need for a strengthened and renewed multilateralism, and his call to re-examine long-standing assumptions and reconsider approaches that have led us astray. It would send a strong signal were this body to explore, together with the SG, a mechanism to assess and evaluate its record and effectiveness on Israel-Palestine, and to examine convening a commission or other appropriate vehicle to appraise anew approaches to resolving this long-standing conflict with its attendant debilitating effects. Thank you very much.
I thank Daniel Levy for his briefing.